Welcome to Women Entrepreneurs Radio. I'm your host, Deborah Bailey. And when I started this show in 2008, I was on a mission to promote women-owned businesses and help women succeed by providing resources and valuable tips from other women and men, small business owners. In each interview, my guests speak openly about their triumphs, the scary times, and tough decisions they had to make along the way. Women Entrepreneurs Radio is about showing women how to harness their natural strengths to achieve success on their own terms. Hi everyone, welcome to Women Entrepreneurs Radio with your host, Deborah Bailey. I am really glad that you could join us today. And if you're listening to this show, on Podomatic, you can listen to it on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify. It's also available on YouTube. You can go to womenentrepreneursecrets.com and you can find out more about the different platforms that the show is available on. And also you can find different articles and announcements and things of interest for women entrepreneurs. So I hope that you will do that as well. And you can also stop by my website, thebaileycoach.com, and find out more about me and find out the things that I am up to these days. So we are going to get right into our conversation with Brynne Kennedy, founder of Topia. And she's an entrepreneur and congressional candidate, and she recognizes the imperative of overhauling standard operating practices for any small business during a time of demographic change and technology advances that allow people to work in many different ways and in different locations. And she's the author of Flat, Fluid, and Fast: Harness the Talent Mobility Revolution to Drive Employee Engagement, Accelerate Innovation, and Unleash Growth. So welcome to the show, Brynne.
Thank you so much, Deb. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you are. And as we had kind of touched on before we started, this is probably one of the best topics that we could be covering at times like this. So, we're definitely going to get more into that. But before we get started with that, if you could just share a little bit about how you got started as an entrepreneur.
Sure. Well, I actually got started in the early part of my life because my mother is an entrepreneur and a small business owner. She has a small retail store that she started 47 years ago, and all through my childhood she was working at her store and making it work through the ups and downs of retail. So I think I was kind of born with that bug a little bit. I started my career in finance, and I had the opportunity to work all over the world doing real estate and infrastructure investing. Mm-hmm. And then I went to business school, and when I was in business school, I was reflecting on my experience working all over the world and some of the changing dynamics of the workforce that I was seeing. And I started Topia actually when I was in business school. And that was 10 years ago. So led the company from, an idea at my dining room table as a first year business student through to a business operating globally and with lots of customers and lots of investment behind it.
For a lot of people who, particularly women entrepreneurs who really want to make their mark and do these things, I'm just going to ask first before we really get into more of the other issues. What would you recommend for the woman entrepreneur who may be seeing that she really wants to go out there, she wants to take this business idea and really make it grow? What are some things that you could recommend?
That's a great question. And I think, it's probably true for any entrepreneur, male or female, of the things I'm going to recommend. Mm-hmm. First, I think find something that you really care about. It's a journey that has ups and downs. So I think it's very important to really believe in the mission and the problem that you're solving. Because if it's just for money, that's not going to get you through the downs. So that's the first thing. I think once you've found the thing that you really care about and the mission that you want to pursue, I think it's really important to test it. I care about this problem. It's a pain point that maybe I've personally experienced as an example, but do other people care about it? And do other people care enough about it to pay money for it? And then thirdly, once you've kind of come up with your idea and your passion and validated that there's a market for it, then you're off and running. And I think it's really important to just have tenacity and heart. Like I said, there are ups and there are downs, but it is the grit and the tenacity that gets you through the downs. And in many cases, businesses are marathons, not sprints, despite what you might read, about the 1 in a million quick success story. The reality is that it is a marathon with a lot of tenacity and a lot of grit.
Now, that we're going through what we're going through globally, certainly tenacity, grit probably have a lot that people are going to have to really tap into. But right now it seems we're really seeing a lot more remote work, of course, by necessity. And, what are some things that you have seen or can speak on regarding those workers being empowered to do their jobs?
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be doing this show, Deb, because I've been thinking about the changing ways that we work in remote work or increasing amounts of flexible and remote work for many years. And obviously I wrote Flat, Fluid, and Fast to look at the changing nature of our jobs and economy. And there's a significant portion actually about more flexible and remote work and some of the best practices to make it successful. But now all of a sudden, much of our economy has had remote work thrust upon them. So, some of the things that I recommend to make it work are, it's a little different whether it's thrust upon you or you're planning for it, but making sure that you have the systems to make it a success. So things like Zoom and video conferencing software, making sure that behaviorally employees are documenting more, because if you can't see each other to have these sporadic conversations that happen within the office setting, it's really important that there's a system, whether it's email or it's some kind of internal repository or a Slack, to be able to communicate more in written word. So that's another best practice we've seen, a little less relevant right now where very few people are in the office, but as a whole, typically meetings and communication work best when either everyone is together or everyone is remote. Sometimes when you have people in a conference room and you have 1 or 2 people remote, they can feel very isolated when the others are sort of sidebarring in the conference room and someone's on the line. So that's not so much of an issue right now, but I think in this current time where we're physically distanced from each other and, there's a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people, be that economic or health, it's very important for companies to maintain connectivity with their employees, keep up the rituals, regular calls, even if they're on video, keep up the communication very regularly over email and Slack and other tools. And just make sure people are still feeling connected and a part of the team.
Yeah, that really is extremely important. And, look at your book, you made some comparisons to how traditional HR teams managed employees and now how things are looking today. Do you see that there's going to be a big conflict as we see how all this shakes out? Do you think that there's going to be a conflict in terms of how things were and how things are now and how they may be becoming?
I don't know that conflict is the right word, but the reason I wrote the book is because I saw that the nature of work is changing very dramatically. We have a lot of macro trends that have, they have been happening and continue to happen to the workforce and to our jobs. Globalization, automation, changing demographics, and now we have shocks like this virus that have come into the market. And so the norm really becomes agility for companies in the face of disruption. And so I think that as an HR leader, you need to build that mindset into your culture, and you need to build the flexibility for people to respond and to manage their own lives in the midst of these changes. and some companies are more ready than others, but the vast majority of them are not really ready for a much more flexible and distributed workforce. And I don't know that conflict is the right word. I look at it more as an opportunity. There is an opportunity for managers and for business leaders to think proactively about the up and coming generation in the workforce, their desire for more flexibility, their desire for more remote work. And then there's also an opportunity as a society and an obligation for us to say, okay, with these trends happening, how do we make sure that everyone's included in that and we don't leave people behind? How do we make sure our workers are transitioning to jobs if their current job is impacted? And in many ways, some of the same principles that underlie our future working styles and economy can be very easily abused to cheat people out of benefits and out of fair pay and out of a dignified retirement and out of collective bargaining and other things that have been foundations of our prior employment models. So I don't know that conflict is the right word, but I think it's incredibly important for everyone to be eyes wide open and to work together between businesses, employees and labor and policymakers.
Yes, that's really very well said, because I think that often it may seem like a conflict when people have been wanting the flexibility. Often a lot of times women are the ones who are trying to manage the home and children and maybe they have a lot of other things going on outside the workplace and aren't always, have the flexibility maybe they needed at that time. And perhaps that has in the process of changing, but it just often seems like there's, in some cases, it is hard to try to get them to open up to see that there's different ways to work.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what would you say that for the small business owner, like what could they do with this, I guess, new world of working and employees or contractors who may be all over the place?
Yeah, I think, it's a really good question. And I think, it's important that we look at this with a small business lens, and the small businesses are the backbone of our economy and our country. They've created 62% of jobs since the 2008 recession. And although the big corporations get a lot of headlines, good and bad, the small businesses are the backbones of our communities and of our country. And that's certainly true where I live. And I think that a lot of these principles are relevant for them. They may be working with people that are distributed across different places. They also may have the opportunity to start a business in a different place where they may have historically been able to, because the people that are working in the business can connect to a broader economy across the country or to an urban economy that's a few hours away. So I think the same principles of fostering communication into your culture, inclusion into your culture, and really welcoming the practices that allow people to work more flexibly and more virtually rather than kind of a 9-to-5 fixed mentality. And in some businesses, that's more possible than others. I think the other thing is that sometimes small businesses aren't in a position or are in a position where they need some seasonal workers at particular points in time, or they need to hire someone with a specific skill to do a particular project, like say redesign a website or do some graphic design or something like that. What we are seeing in the new economy is there's a much greater percentage of people that are choosing to work in what we call the contract or the freelance economy and lend their skills to different businesses. So going with the graphic designer example, you may have someone who chooses to be a freelancer as a graphic designer and lend that skill to many different small businesses. Now, that is the positive side of the freelance economy, and it's an opportunity for small businesses to hire those skills on demand. There is a negative side to that as well, as I've mentioned, where some of these same principles are really being abused by businesses to push people into being contractors and cheat them out of their benefits and their full employment and their health care and their retirement. So as a society, we have to figure out how we balance that. We have to make sure, as I talk about in the book, in the final chapter in the policy section, that we have a contract for work in this country where everyone, whether they're a freelancer or they're a full-time employee, has the opportunity to collectively bargain for fair pay for their skills, that has the opportunity to have affordable and accessible health care, has the opportunity to invest and earn a dignified retirement. And that's something I'm really passionate about, because I think if we don't look at the changing nature of the workforce holistically, we'll end up with some very good but some very, very bad opportunities or things for a lot of people.
That's very true. And also I've seen, I'm sure, it's been in the news a lot about gig workers and how, again, like you're mentioning, they feel that maybe they're not getting what they need from the companies that they work for, or they always have to get gigs because they always have to keep going.
It's a huge issue for so many people.
What do you think would be the future of that? Is that something that has to change as well? I mean, is that really sustainable for people who feel that they have to constantly be getting gigs or constantly be getting these jobs and not getting what they need?
No, not at all. And it's eroding our middle class, and it's not fair to those workers. You know, in my book, I talk very specifically about the white collar creative economy and some of the fastest growing companies in the world. And I talk about some of the skills that they require and some of the people that are on freelance platforms and freelance structures, lending skills like software engineering or graphic design. These are typically people that opt into being a part of that ecosystem and earn a very, very high rate for their skill and appreciate that flexibility. The other side of the coin, as we've talked about, is there are a huge amount of people in the gig economy that are not treated fairly, that are being forced into contracting roles so that corporate profits will increase for investors and shareholders, and that are really, really, really being treated badly by a lot of companies. And in many ways, we are leading the way here in California with some of the legislation that's being put out to ensure that people have the option to work as a full-time employee and earn benefits and be able to collectively bargain and have a fair retirement if they are working in a job that is ostensibly full-time.
Well, that is definitely something that is necessary, as I know, as having been a contractor in many cases, and, it can be very challenging. Because you're going through another person who's then going through the company, and then you feel that you never really have any real connection to the company because you've got that buffer there.
And the saddest thing is, there are a huge number of examples of, people that have worked for many, many years at a company, really know the company, really care about the company, have provided for their family and the company, and then the company decides that they want to reduce costs, so they just, throw those people out the door and move to cheaper contractors. None of that is good for people, for society. There are good companies and there are bad companies, but I think we as a society, and one of the reasons I wanted to run for Congress is we need people in government that can fight for working people, for our working families, and also understand where the economy is going, and that it is changing, and that there is a class of people in the creative economy that choose to work like this. So that's a very difficult balance to strike, but, for me, I will always be fighting for people like my own family that, are working class and working people and need to have those protections.
Exactly. I can definitely identify with that. And one of your chapters also talks about redefining career paths. And I think you can look on LinkedIn or different things and see it's almost like people are still looking at jobs in a traditional way. And not really opening it up to maybe defining career paths a little differently. What are your thoughts on that? Is it really going to take a major change in all of our thinking to really see the possibilities?
I think to some extent, I mean, and again, it depends on, what you're talking about here, but if you kind of contrast today's working environment and career paths to many years ago, you will see differences. And in the book, I talk about my grandfather's career as an example of this. So he worked at a paper factory, paper company. And, his career was very much, okay, I'll work at this company. I get benefits from my family. And if I do well each year, I'll kind of pay my dues and move up the corporate, structure, the factory structure, and go from sort of, junior widget producer to medium widget producer to senior, et cetera, et cetera. But all within the same department and in a very linear sense. Today, we see an increasing amount of people, I call it a career zigzag instead of a career ladder. People may start in one industry and then move into another, or in one division of the company and then move into another. The millennial generation in particular increasingly thinks about work as a series of tours of duty between and acquiring and learning different things from each of those tours. What this means for the company is that they have these great people that, if something does change in the corporate landscape or if there is a disruption, they can very easily be moved into a different role because everyone has particular skills that are applicable across, different industries and different roles. It also means that they need to, if you're an HR leader or you're a company leader, you need to provide people the opportunity to work across different areas and learn different skills as a means of retention and engagement. But that is a kind of a fundamental change in thinking from the 9 to 5, I'm in the office and I go up a linear career ladder that we've come from. And again, this is not everyone. We still have many industries, particularly in our trades, which I'm a huge proponent of, where that does happen and where we almost need to support more of that, more apprenticeships and more journeys from apprenticeship through to earning a skill and growing your career in that way. But in the white collar creative economy millennial world, we're increasingly seeing kind of a tour of duty driven career path.
And that sounds like that would be very beneficial, I think, for everyone, as time goes on. And certainly, I have people in my family who are plumbers and electricians and all of that, and the whole apprenticeship, all of that is built into that, and learning the trade and often really being in a lot of demand because they have skills that, where I live in New Jersey, a lot of times it's hard to find people who are really good at these things that you need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very big believer, and again, one of the reasons I decided to run for Congress from a business background, I'm a very big believer that in many ways we've failed as a society in building an alternative career path to a 4-year college. You should be able to have a good middle class life without a 4-year degree, with an apprenticeship and learning a trade and building your career that way. Our building trades across our country do an incredible job of offering apprenticeships in things like iron work or plumbing and pipe fitting or, various aspects of the building trades. But a lot of people don't know about it. And a lot of people in high school don't know about it, or community college. And I see a really, really big opportunity for us as a society to embrace and celebrate more people that can go into the trades, earn a skill, earn a good middle class wage and a dignified retirement. And that should be celebrated just as much as the people who go through a 4-year college and, enter a corporate job or become an entrepreneur or become a freelance software engineer. All of these things are required to make society work, and everyone should be able to earn a good wage and invest in their future through those different paths.
Yes, I think that's great. I totally agree. So can you please share where people can find out more about you?
Absolutely. So, firstly, my book is called Flat, Fluid, and Fast. It's a tongue twister. It's available on Amazon and available on my website, flatfluidfast.com. I've touched on it, but I'm also running for Congress in California's 4th Congressional District, actually against the sole member of Congress from California who just voted against the coronavirus aid package. So more important than ever to have change in our Congress, in our district. And you can find out more about my campaign at brynneforcongress.com. And that's BRYNNEFOR Congress.com.
Wonderful. And these links will be in the show notes as well, everyone. So you'll be able to click and find out more. But yes, I totally agree with what you're saying, that, we really have to look at work differently and maybe in a sense go back to some other things you were saying about how things were and people had to trade and they could, build this stronger middle class and those are things we really can't afford to lose at all.
Yeah, and like you said, there's huge shortages in our trades and it's a, great opportunity to learn a skill, run it as a small business or a part of a larger operation. And also it's very performance oriented, learning a skill and going through the apprenticeships that I've seen as a part of our building trades unions. I mean, they're no joke. It's hard math and hard work to learn a skill. Yes. I went to one of the math classes and, walked around this iron workers apprenticeship program and I was like, oh my gosh, I could never do that.
Wow. Yeah.
So, it's just really important, I think, as a society that we talk about all forms of business and all forms of small business and all forms of work in our country and opportunity to earn a good middle class wage and doing it in all different ways, a trade, a virtual worker in the creative economy, someone in a corporate setting that goes into work every day and is a full-time employee. These are all important parts of our business economy, but they also all need to be supported with appropriate benefits, retirement, and collective bargaining rights.
Yes, I totally agree. Because people want to feel that what they do really matters, and also they can support themselves, their families, and also contribute to their community. It's all connected. So, as we're seeing right now, I think, we're seeing how connected.
Yeah, and one really, going to the virtual work and returning to the virtual remote work point, one statistic I learned when I was running Topia that always has really stuck with me and I think will really stick with me in Congress is one job, one person who, decides or for whatever reason can work in a remote way in a particular community. Like, let's say, instead of moving to San Francisco, I work in Sonora, California as a remote, software engineer or, whatever. Then create 4 jobs in the service economy locally. Because that person, then is going to the coffee shop locally. They're getting their dry cleaning done. They're hiring a plumber. And that's a super, super important thing for us as a country to think about as we think about economic growth and the vibrancy of communities outside of these kind of major urban hubs.
Yes, that's true. And also it means that people, as you're saying, they may not have to necessarily try to find that place in this one spot where they are living, or they're trying to find something that may be very expensive because it's such demand. And they could live a little in some other place and still do the job.
Exactly. And, there's some really interesting, especially with the cost of housing in a lot of these cities and some of the other issues that people face. We see this where I live in Roseville, which is about 2 hours from San Francisco, and much of my congressional district is, 2 to 3 hours from San Francisco. We see a huge amount of people moving to our area because they can buy a home and we have good public schools and, they have the ability to work more flexibly maybe with an employer in the city, drive there occasionally, but work more virtually. Maybe they travel regularly anyhow as a job. And it creates more vibrancy locally in the community and more economic opportunity locally, as we talked about, from all those downstream things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's very true, because, I'm maybe 30 miles from New York City, but not many people can afford to live in New York City. And so it pushes out to New Jersey, and then pushes further out into the suburbs, and then people are just trying to be able to afford a decent place to live and not have to commute 2 hours a day. So,
Exactly.
yeah, there's a lot of impacts here, and we're certainly seeing, in the middle of all this, I think there's certainly a lot to learn from it. So, I think a lot of things are going to be looked at much differently for sure after,
and it's, it takes leadership between the public sector and the private sector, and thinking ahead to the future, thinking how do we spur economic growth outside of cities? How do we make sure everyone's included in a changing economy? How do we kind of re-architect the social contract for work that we've had for many years in a changing economy? And those are things that, got me really excited about running for Congress, because we, are entering a different future, and we need people who understand that and who can work at the apex of policy and business and entrepreneurs and innovation to make sure it's a force for good. And, when I was growing up, I grew up in a rural part of Western Massachusetts. And when I was growing up, it was a place that had vibrant jobs, old mills and GE and these kinds of things. And then as I got older, all those jobs left because a different generation of politicians and business leaders really forgot about a lot of parts of our country outside of cities. And, we see political impacts from that. We see people that have lost hope. When I was growing up, it was families losing hope and public schools going downhill and stores closing on Main Street. And we have an opportunity to really think intentionally about this with leaders that understand it and lead with head and heart in Washington and other places.
Yes, we need more of that. Without a doubt. We certainly could use much more of that at this time. And as I said, I think a lot of things.
I know, it's so funny when I tell people I'm running for Congress, like the first question everyone asks, they hear my background and, hear I'm running for Congress, that I built a business and, worked in finance and da-da-da. And then I say I'm running for Congress, and people always look at me with these horrified looks, and they're like, why would you ever want to do that? And I'm like, my heart always falls a little bit, because I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the greatest honor to be a part of, the future of our country and fighting for working families like the one I grew up in. But people are like so horrified. I'm like, oh my God, this is why I want to do it, because we got to get out of this partisan, toxic, roll your eyes world.
Right. You're right. Oh my gosh. But you're right. This is something that more people have to realize they can be a part of the process, and they can, do these positive things, and instead of kind of falling into
I always joke, when I ran a company, like, everyone wants to talk to people who start businesses, and they invite you to speak all the time, and, invite you to the dinner party or whatever it is. And like the minute that I said I was running for Congress, people were like, ooh, it was like we're some kind of person, like no one wanted you at the dinner party, and like no one wanted to get a coffee, and like it's so bizarre and such an incredible indication of why we need a new generation of all ages and all stripes and all parties in Washington, so that people believe again in the power of, policy and working with government. I always tell people, I'm like, they're like, oh, you're a politician. I'm like, no, I'm a business person and a normal person like you. Like, we can have a glass of wine and have a conversation. What?
Oh my God. Wow. They're literally like,
yesterday when I ran a company, you guys all wanted to talk to me, and today, like, no one wants to talk.
Wow. Oh my God. Yeah, it's time to change that.
I mean, just on a serious note, it is because it's so partisan and so toxic today.
Yeah,
and, you learn in the private sector, you learn as an entrepreneur, you learn in the work you do, and probably everyone listening to this show does, that there is beauty and power in listening to people who have different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
You debate different ways to solve things. Some of those, management meetings that are very heated result in the most effective solution for a problem, for a customer, or for employees. And for some reason, we've gotten so polarized today and so radical and on both sides that we've forgotten how to solve problems and how to also have the courage to stand up and say, I want to work with both parties. I want to represent everyone. I want to listen to different views. And that's really, really, really what I am about, because we do have big problems to solve, like this virus, instead of like really thinking about, okay, how do I solve this problem as quick as humanly possible and get people back to work and get people healthy?
That's what people want out here. That's what they want, in between, hoarding toilet paper.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't care if it's like, a Republican idea, a Democratic idea, or an alien's idea. Like, we want to solve problems and improve people's lives.
Yes. And I think that gets lost, unfortunately, because people aren't listening, and that's why it's good for people to hear and come together, because, right now we're being forced to. So we'll see if we are up to the task of moving past all of that and solving a problem that right now that the entire world is facing. So we're gonna see how we're able to do this. But Brynne, if you could share any final thoughts that you have, or anything you want to summarize that you've already touched on.
Well, I think, being a female entrepreneur show, my final thought is just, if you have an idea and you have a passion and you see a problem that you can solve, whether that is in business or that is in government, take the plunge. It is the noblest of pursuits to solve problems for other people and improve their lives. There's many ways to do that, and I've done it as an entrepreneur. I'm now hoping to do it as a congresswoman. But I would just encourage every young woman or older woman or little girl, like, if you will see problems, raise your hand, jump in and solve them, because that is what we need as a country, and it's what people need from us.
And thank you so much for joining me, Brynne. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thanks so much, Deb. It was great to be on the show and appreciate the chat.
So everyone, I know that you enjoyed this. Please make sure you share it on social media, share it with your friends, and definitely check out the links that I will be sharing about Brynne's book and her run for Congress and other information. So once again, to Women Entrepreneurs Radio with your host, Deborah Bailey. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for joining us. You can also join in the conversation on Facebook.com/Women Entrepreneurs and on the website, WomenEntrepreneursecrets.com. And don't forget to listen in on dvcoach.podomatic.com and on iTunes.